It's 6 p.m. here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Daniel Che. Welcome to our newscast. North Korea monitoring website 38 North says the regime's missile threat is very real. Its KN-08, a road mobile weapon, could slip past U.S. ground-based interceptors and reach the U.S. mainland. There's a chance international sanctions on Iran could be lifted in June after a deal reached by Tehran and world powers. When that happens, the door of opportunity will swing wide open for Korean firms, especially builders doing business with Iran. It seems there's been a shift in the way Koreans think about senior citizen privileges. A local think tank reports most parents do not want to be a burden to their children in their twilight years and calls on the government to create a system to take better care of the elderly. We begin with North Korea's weapons capability. It seems like they are more than just for ornamental purposes. A senior U.S. military leader says Pyongyang now has the ability to fire a road-mobile ICBM capable of carrying nuclear weapons to the U.S. mainland, adding to the list of topics for the U.S. defense chief to discuss with Japan and South Korea when he visits this week. Our Laah Hyun-kyung starts us off.
The doubts about a North Korean missile are turning into a real threat. Many watchers had believed that North Korea's KN-08 intercontinental ballistic missile, paraded in 2012, was a mock-up, but a senior U.S. military official says Pyongyang has likely made a breakthrough.
Our assessment is that they have the ability to put it on a nuclear weapon on a KN-08 and shoot it at the homeland.
While refusing to explain the evidence, Admiral Courtney said the missile is operational today, but added that the regime has not yet tested the weapon. The KN-08 could have a range of up to 9,000 kilometers, according to North Korea monitoring website 38 North, which means it could reach the U.S. mainland. The U.S. is known to have about 30 ground-based interceptors on its west coast, but the fact that the KN-08 is a road mobile weapon is going to make it difficult for Washington to carry out a preemptive strike on the missile. The commander's comments and the report come amid U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter's visit to Japan and Korea this week. The speculation is that these factors will make Washington's alleged push for deployment of its so-called THAAD missile defense system to South Korea more legitimate. Laah Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
North Korea says Iran's nuclear situation is completely different from Pyongyang's. An official from North Korea's mission to the United Nations told Voice of America that last week's agreement on curbing Tehran's nuclear program is good for Iran, but that the North is indifferent about it. The official said Pyongyang cannot give up its nuclear arms when American aircraft carriers carrying tactical nuclear weapons are hovering around the Korean peninsula. The official was referring to a recent round of military exercises between Seoul and Washington, which Pyongyang perceives as a rehearsal for war. While the U.S. and South Korea maintain the exercises are purely defensive in nature. The economic and financial sanctions imposed on Iran for its nuclear program will be eased in a few months' time following a deal with world powers. The action is expected to benefit Korean companies that once did a brisk business in the oil-rich country. Our Shin Se-min tells us more.
Korean firms doing business in Iran may be back on track soon. The companies, mostly construction firms, are gearing up for a wide range of business opportunities there as Iran is in the midst of boosting its infrastructure. Iran was the fourth largest construction market for Korean builders before international sanctions were imposed in 2006, and the orders from Tehran stopped in 2009.
Korean construction firms have established a good reputation, as many of them even stuck around during the Iraq War. With the sanctions to be lifted, the Iranian market will open up, giving more orders to companies like Talim International, GS-ENC, and Hyundai ENC, Korea's leading builders.
The easing of sanctions on Iran is expected to open up other doors for Korea as well. Korean exporters of auto parts and steel are also hoping to reap the benefits of the nuke deal. In addition, this opens the way of new influx of goods and services from Iran to Korea.
Without the sanctions on Iran, Korean companies will at least be able to recapture their market share, which was lost due to the sanctions. And Iran will also be buying Korean-made goods like home appliances and IT products.
And there's another big benefit for Koreans at home and abroad. Under the deal, Iran will be allowed to increase its oil exports by up to 1 million barrels per day. And experts say that could bring down the global oil prices by as early as next year, resulting in cheaper oil for both Korean companies in Iran and Korean drivers here at home. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The latest on Japan's efforts to distort history the way they see fit. The country is trying to gain support from the international community for its claim to Korea's Dokdo Island. It's also stepping up its efforts to educate students about the claim. Our Kim Yeon-bin reports.
Japan has renewed its false claim to the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island by increasing the number of textbooks making the assertion. In 2011, only 4 out of 18 textbooks carried the claim, but that number jumped to 13 this year. Japan has long laid claim to Dokdo. Tokyo says it incorporated Dokdo into Japanese territory under international law in 1905, and that Seoul is occupying the territory illegally. Last year, at a take-back Dokdo ceremony in Tokyo, a cabinet member had promised to strengthen Japan's territorial claims in school textbooks.
We will pursue various efforts to educate people from home and abroad so they understand our stance.
So why is Japan stepping up its claim now?
Japan wants to let other countries know there is a sovereignty conflict, to increase awareness as the case comes to the International Court of Justice.
Experts say that another factor is that this year is the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II, meaning there's more attention on Japan. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se has slammed Tokyo's recent territorial claims to Korea's Dokdo Island, saying Dokdo is the first Korean territory that was sacrificed during Japan's invasion of the Korean peninsula. At a meeting with lawmakers from the ruling Saenuri Party's Foreign Affairs Committee Wednesday, Yoon made it clear that Dokdo has been historically and legally established as Korean territory. The foreign minister went on to say that the diplomatic and security situation Seoul is facing now is at its most severe. However, Yoon added that Seoul will try to balance a strong response and cooperation when it comes to issues involving Japan. Speaking at the National Assembly today, the floor leader of the ruling Saenuri Party, Yoo Seung-min, advocated for political cooperation in the handling of pressing issues such as the recovery of the sunken Sewol ferry and the government's push for public pension reforms. Our Choi Yu-sun has more.
In his first address to the National Assembly since being elected the ruling party's floor leader, Yoo Seung-min said the government should keep its promise to find every missing body from the Sewol ferry, which sank off Korea's southwestern coast almost a year ago.
I'm calling for the swift conclusion of a technical review on the salvage and recovery of the Sewol ferry.
9 of the more than 300 passengers who died in the accident remain unaccounted for. The families of the victims have demanded the vessel be recovered immediately. President Park Geun-hye said earlier this week the government will pursue the issue after the civilian-led technical review. The ruling party floor leader also urged the opposition party to participate in reforming Korea's costly public employee pension system. The two parties had previously agreed to reach a compromise on the matter by the end of this month's parliamentary session.
If the opposition party wants to call itself an economic party, it must push for the passage of public employee pension reforms during the April session.
The outspoken lawmaker also criticized the Park administration's welfare without taxes policy, saying it's time for the rival political parties to set their differences aside and talk about achieving a balance between welfare and taxes. As for the question of stationing the controversial THAAD U.S. missile defense system in South Korea, Yoo stressed that Seoul needs to display a strong deterrent against North Korea's security threats to bring about peace in the region. In a rare move, the main opposition party welcomed Yoo's message, taking special note of his criticisms of the government's economic policies. Opposition party leader Moon Jae-in will address the assembly on Thursday. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Now let's focus on some changes in Korean culture and society. It seems the majority of Koreans believe the government should be doing more to support the nation's senior citizens who helped make Korea what it is today. A report published by a local think tank is calling for a greater balance of support between family, society, and the government. Our Connie Kim has the details.
Children taking care of their aging parents has been the norm in Korea's deep-rooted Confucian culture for centuries. But is it still the case these days?
I don't think it's possible for families to solely look after aging parents. Life expectancy has gone on longer while people are retiring earlier.
After raising my kids, I don't want to become a burden to them after I stop working. I think the government needs to play an active role in supporting seniors.
This seems to be the growing public sentiment. A report by the Korea Development Institute shows that over the past decade, children who think they should support their aging parents plunged from about 70% to slightly over 30%.
The drop is mainly due to the shrinking size of families and parents putting a priority on investing in their children's education. These factors are quickly diminishing the traditional norm of supporting elderly parents.
Kim, the author of the report, says a changing culture has resulted in more senior citizens unable to financially support themselves. Korea's elderly poverty and suicide rates rank the highest among OECD nations. In light of those grim figures, this report calls on families, society, and the government to work together to find ways to economically and emotionally support aging generations. It also calls for the government to create a system that will revitalize the social well-being of seniors.
Some community welfare centers have programs that help engage the elderly and younger generations. But there needs to be more social workers and programs that aim to nurture active participation from the elderly population.
While systematic support is key, experts also say it's necessary for individuals to do more to prepare for their senior years.
Many are aware of the seriousness of Korea's aging society and elderly poverty problem, but not much is actively done. People should have a portfolio of income sources aside from their monthly pension payments.
Korea's welfare ministry says 3 out of 10 people over the age of 65 continue to work post-retirement, mainly to support daily living costs. This as 11% of senior citizens say they've thought of committing suicide, mainly due to economic hardships. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Staying focused in Korea, there's been a huge jump in the number of people who are taking advantage of a government plan to create more part-time jobs with flexible work hours. Korea's Labor Ministry reported Wednesday that nearly 4,700 people were employed as part-time civil servants in the first quarter of the year. That's nearly 10 times more than the 459 employed during the same period last year. The civil servants in these positions work 15 to 30 hours a week with a flexible schedule. The ministry says the program will eventually expand to include more fields such as marketing and accounting. The gaps between haves and the have-nots is widening in Korea, and it is in most countries around the world that's the case. While most people struggle to make ends meet and are cutting back on the basics, Korea's richest 10% are spending more and more on designer brands and luxury goods. Our Kwon So-ah has this report.
The polarization of spending habits in Korea is getting worse, as the nation's low and mid-income earners struggle to get by, while the rich continue to enjoy the good times despite the sluggish economy. Data released by the retail industry on Wednesday shows first-quarter sales at large retailers, popular among consumers who tend to watch their pennies, mostly declined compared to 1 year ago. Lotte Mart, the second biggest retailer in the country, posted a 3% drop in sales, and Home Plus an almost 1% dip, while E-Mart, the nation's #1 retailer, saw sales edge up a mere 0.8%. Breaking it down, E-Mart's fashion and grain sales in March both plunged by over 10% on year. Fisheries and processed food fell by 9% and 3% respectively. The big supermarkets have tried to boost sales by reducing the price of everyday products such as milk, but the figures speak for themselves, as sales managers say the strategies weren't that effective. On the other hand, sales of more expensive products like imported spices and vegetables weren't that affected. That trend is even clearer when we look at sales at two of Korea's high-end department stores, Lotte and Hyundai. They recorded gains of between 8% and 15% in their luxury designer label sales. This reflects a recent study which shows Korea's richest 10% own nearly half of the nation's wealth.
Department stores and distributors these days are focusing more of their efforts on marketing strategies targeting VVIPs, as their consumption takes up a considerable amount of sales.
Some examples of this include special campaigns for products like expensive desserts and premium coffee, and that's raising concerns that spending trends will become even more polarized. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And we've come to the part of the newscast where I say thank you for watching. We do have more coming your way at 10 p.m. Korea time, so join us then. Goodbye for now.